Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here on YouTube, and welcome to, of course, another album of the week. This, of course, is episode number 90. Now, for this week's pick, which I decided to pick this album, that, of course, is Stand Up and Fight, which is the second full-length album from new wave of British heavy metal legends, Quartz. Now, of course, this was released in 1980. But the thing is, it's not been quite specified on what month or day, at least, this album was released on. So it's just 1980. That's about it. Still, though, I'm still glad to at least I'm still finally glad to spotlight this album. If you were to tell me, at least I do dig most of the albums Quartz released. I dig the very last album, the Fear No Evil. But if you were to ask me what would be my favorite Quartz album, this is the album. It is for sure Stand Up and Fight. I mean, compared to the first album from 1977, which again, I know that Quartz, I know many people don't really, when you seem to ask new wave or British heavy metal purists, a lot of people say 1979 was the true starting year, but still, thing is, Quartz does get considered a new wave or British heavy metal band, and so their first album was released in 1977. So whether or not you consider it or not, still, it was, they are a new wave or British heavy metal band, but thing is, compared to, of course, back on track here, the first album, which was, I should have pointed this one out, while when people talk about Black Sabbath inspired rock and metal bands, usually people talk about, for sure, bands like Witchfinder General, for sure, and people also talk about bands like Pentagram, and at times maybe Saint Vitus, or just bands in that vein. People will talk about those kind of bands, but you never really hear people really put Quartz in that list, especially higher up, because on the first album, while it's nowhere near as heavy as this album, and I'll elaborate on the reasons, but of course, it's the when it comes to the first album, it's not as heavy as this, but good lord, there's a thing is, it's definitely more 70s sounding, but goddamn, that is definitely a good record. But I'm going off track once again, but goddamn, in comparison, I think Stand Up and Fight was a much, it's more focused, and definitely for sure their most heaviest record. It's also them showing a lot more conviction on this album, and I mean, this was, again, it's the beginning of the new wave or British heavy metal movement. And the thing is, there is more Black Sabbath style riffs on this album, though not very doomy, though at times it can be kind of doomy. But good lord, there's just every bit of the songs and the riffs on this album. Oh my god, every one of them are just absolutely killer. And the late Mike Taylor, I almost feel like his vocals is like if Biff Byford and Bon Scott had a child, because of that. He's like the love child of those two, in my view. And of course, you might also get a little bit of Roger Daltrey here and there of The Who, but it just works for this album. And each one of these songs, it delivers. And also, should be pointed out that the producer on this album, which was Derek Lawrence, is best known for producing also some of the earlier Wishbone Ash albums, and also produced Fist's very first album, Turn the Hell On, which was released the very same year. And I'm also looking on his page here on Metal Archives, he also even produced the first 3 Deep Purple albums that were in the 1960s. Definitely shows you the age of this guy for sure, of Derek Lawrence, but he's the one that produced this album right here, and he just gives the band a heavy dose for some. It just sounds like a ton of bricks with this album, like almost an anvil getting dropped onto at least a semi-truck. It just isn't. It just destroys. Every bit of this album just has a cool fucking feel. I like it. And there's just plenty of heavy rockers on here. I mean, this is still the beginning, the height of the new wave or British heavy metal movement. But goddamn, there's just so many great songs. I mean, it opens up with Stand Up and Fight. Again, just a heavy song, shows a lot of Black Sabbath influence. And of course, we get to the very sleazy heavy rocker, Charlie Snow, which I remember reading a review, and I think the person in that review pretty much said that I think this saying that songs like this also in kind of way might have inspired Motley Crue for Shout at the Devil. It just has that kind of feel, of course. It's a heavy record. And of course, we have also like Revenge, Stoking Up the Fires of Hell, Rock and Roll Child. We also have the very almost conspiracy theorist song, which is Questions, and then Wildfire, which Wildfire also draws quite a bit of Black Sabbath. Actually, it draws from one of the heavy riffs from Megalomaniac off of Sabotage. It really draws a lot from that riff, but it just literally milks every bit of that riff. Fantastic. Again, there's just so many good songs on here for me. But we also get some lighter moments like Can't Say No to You, which is very 70s for sure. Definitely something you probably would expect from, let's say, like The Who, for example, or even what's another band I can really think of at this point. It's very British rock for sure. But again, it actually works. Again, this is a very new wave of British heavy metal sounding in its aspects, especially on a song like Questions, which has like a crossbreed between Diamond Head and Saxon in many ways. It's just good shit for me. Revenge, of course, it's just so good. There really just isn't a bad song on this album. And again, I think this is also Mike Taylor's best performance. He just shows a lot of conviction on this album. Just singing from every single corner. He's just firing on all cylinders on this album. Every one of the band here. And of course, I should definitely point out there's only 4 members here. Originally, it was 5 members on the very first album because of Jeff Nichols, who of course would end up leaving Quartz after that album and would end up doing a lot, being at least a hired gun for Black Sabbath, beginning with, of course, Heaven and Hell, and pretty much lasting all up until 1992's Dehumanizer. And the reason that all comes from, and this also brings up a lot of the Black Sabbath ties, is I think it all comes from the fact that on the very first album, it was produced by Tony Iommi. And again, and the thing is, it all came from the fact that before recording that album, Quartz, I think, was kind of picked as a band to open up for Black Sabbath, I think, while they were touring with AC/DC, which that also brings up another one. Since I even brought up Mike Taylor, I've also want to kind of question, was Mike Taylor ever one of those that might have been somewhat considered for a possible replacement for Bon Scott at that time period? I know AC/DC was looking at plenty of guys for sure to replace Bon Scott. I know the guy from Moxie was also one. I think maybe even the guy from that would sing for the Australian band Heaven. There were plenty of singers, and I'm wondering if Mike Taylor might have been one that could have been eyed. Because again, I get plenty of Bon Scott swagger here and there on this album for some reason. It definitely seems to show, especially on a song like Charlie Snow and Revenge and Stoking Up the Fires of Hell. I mean, I definitely hear a lot of Bon Scott swagger a little bit in his tone on some of the songs. Still, though, they had, again, back to the whole Black Sabbath ties. They opened up for them, and the thing is, Tony Iommi, I think, had heard or heard the bits what he of Quartz playing on their for their set, and that's where it led to of course convincing of course the owner of Jet Records, which is if I recall was the father of Sharon Osbourne. Still, they had ties to, of course, Jet Records, and that was, I think it was Tony Iommi was the one that contributed to that. He was one that, for sure, that recommended Quartz to them, and that's how I think everything all set, and he was the one that decided to produce the first album. So I think that's where a lot of even the ties for when Jeff Nichols, I think, left Quartz. It was like an easy phone call to us, like, hey, I think Jeff Nichols, I think, was poised to kind of replace, if I recall, Geezer Butler, because of there was some a question, I think some hints before after Never Say Die that Geezer Butler was not completely on board with going on Heaven and Hell. If you want to hear the rest of that, I think I do talk about more of that on my Album of the Week Spotlight for Heaven and Hell from Black Sabbath. But eventually, of course, again, to go into that, of course, Jeff Nichols didn't, but he definitely ended up doing a lot of synth and a lot of the synth sounds for Black Sabbath on, of course, beginning with Heaven and Hell and up to Dehumanizer in 1992. So he worked from that on, and for sure, that definitely left Quartz being a four-piece. And the thing is, on this album, there's almost barely any synth sounds, save for some of the stuff in Charlie Snow, which, again, I should definitely point out the reason how so sleazy it is. Well, it's pretty much about cocaine. That's pretty much what it is. It's about cocaine and sex. Typical of at least the rock bands of this period. But still, there are just plenty of stuff on this album. Goddamn, I mean, I can go on and on about this album, but to me, I think this is by far their best album. They're just a lot heavier. They're playing with more razor-sharp attitude. Just every bit of the band is just absolutely on fire with this album. It is my personal favorite album from Quartz. So after this album what was released, Mike Taylor would then leave the band. I know they would then release a couple, the Satan Serenade EP, and then contribute a few more tracks before then him ultimately leaving. That's when it leads to Against All Odds, which had a different singer, and then they split up. And then sometime I think there would be sporadic reunions here and there, but eventually they reunited for the first time with at least most of the original guys, just minus the late Mike Taylor. And that's when we led to, of course, 2016's Fear No Evil, which was a good album. It was a good album, though I wouldn't say it was nearly as good as this album, but it was still a quality, quality modern day new wave of British heavy metal. After that, though, Jeff Nichols would then eventually was sadly pass away. So that making it the final album for Jeff Nichols to perform in Quartz. So that was about it. So there you go. This is just a classic record in my opinion. I don't think it gets a whole enough love, even if Quartz are definitely revered as for sure a new wave of British heavy metal band. You really don't hear a lot of people really say, oh yeah, Quartz, they're definitely one of the top new wave of British heavy metal bands. Yeah, they're at the same league as Diamond Head. They're at the same league as Sex. You don't really hear that. It's just, oh yeah, they're a good band. Stamp and Fight's a good record. The self-title's fine. Against All Odds is, it's okay. That's about it. People will talk about. And Satan Serenade is probably the one where it's like, yeah, that's a classic for some reason. Still, I think this is their best record by far. This is their best. So this album, of course, was released in 1980. For those who might have lived with this album, definitely let me know what your thoughts of this album. What were your first time hearing it? Do you still share your same opinions about this album? Or at least, do you think this is one of their best records? If not, let me know in the comment section below. If you haven't heard this album, and if you like, again, just good classic new wave or British heavy metal, you know what? I think this I definitely do recommend checking this album out. Again, if you like Saxon, you like Black Sabbath, you like Diamond Head, you like any of those kind of bands, this I think is a good recommendation. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. This is for Thrash Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.